What's your worst friend stabbed your backstory? My friend was dating a girl who I could tell just didn't like me, but at least we were civil to one another, until the camping trip on the May 24th holiday weekend. She was adamant about keeping our alcohol separate. That was fine. I had my beer, they had their Mike's Hard Lemonades, fine. Then I got up early on the first morning and made pancakes for everyone. Why? Because that's just how I roll. When the campers rolled out of their tents to the smell of apple cinnamon pancakes and campfire coffee, she was the only one to flip out. I'd gone into her cooler and used her margarine. My buddy just looked pained and tried to keep the peace as I tossed her a toonie and apologized. Her reaction was to grab a lock from his gym bag and lock their tent with their booze and their food. Later, he came to me and asked if he could borrow the car, so that they could run into town, get some condoms and have some words about being a bit easier with the other campers. I said okay, and handed him the keys. When they returned hours later, the tank was empty, and the field kitchen, a wooden box with straps called a wanagon with plates, cutlery, pots and pans etc. was missing from the back of the station wagon. We searched the camp, nothing. It was my dad's and had been handed down in the family for generations. I drove off to fill the tank and buy a new tub of margarine, and was halfway down the country road when I saw the wanagon on the side of the road, smashed in the ditch. There were marks along the back panels beside the flattened down seats where one of them had clearly pushed it out the back of the moving car. After piling it all, stunned, piece by piece back into the wagon, I gassed up and drove back, then packed up. Not a word was said by anyone, until I tore up the camping permit and peeled out with their shouts behind me in the dust. Never spoke to either one of them again. While freelancing on a sweet gig that came out of the blue, I found out that I would be working with Sean, a guy who was in my group at a former ad agency. Awesome, a friendly face. Sean was a geek. No one liked him, and as his associate creative director supervisor I looked out for him. He seemed to try hard and I didn't understand why everyone excluded him. During 2 rounds of layoffs, I went to bat for the guy and saved his job, promising to work with him. He was always busy and, soon after, I moved on to a new job. So I looked forward to working with him some more and proving those mean bastards from our old agency wrong. While working this freelance job, L sensed something was wrong soon after it began. Sean had no ideas. None. He literally brought a blank pad in day after day. Excuses were that he was tired, the assignment confused him, etc. I was nervous, but I was stuck. So, since we were on a team, I shared my ideas, our only ideas, with him. We had to present an hour after lunch. During lunch, I had to go to a doctor's appointment with my wife, who was seriously ill. On my way back to the office, the cab I was in had an accident. A dick in a Lexus slammed into us. No one was hurt, but it totaled both cars. Further, I didn't feel comfortable leaving the cabbie, as he was foreign and spoke little English. The guy who hit us was ranting, so I stayed to give a statement to the police. I called Sean to explain and asked if he minded handling the meeting and asked him to relay my situation. Then Prick presented my work, claimed it was all his and they sent me home because Sean nailed it. Salt in the wound. Took 9 months to get paid for the time I did put in. All along, I tried to explain but no one believed me. He copied my notes in his own writing and submitted them as proof. As far as they were concerned, I was riding this guy's coattails. I could have kicked his nuts for a week without getting bored. 2 months later, he was found out when he tried it again. Dozens of former co-workers called to rub my nose in it. Still think we're just picking on Sean? I learned that sometimes people are shunned because they deserve it. I had a friend for 20 years. He called me at night to ask to borrow $3,600. It was for his last year of a degree and would get him a raise when he graduated. At the time I was making quite a bit of money and had lots in the bank. He said he would pay me back in a year. 3 years later, after the crash, he still had not paid me back and was constantly giving me lame excuses like, he needs 3 vacations a year and is saving to buy a house. My situation had changed and he was still not only refusing to pay me back but still asking for favors and loans. I finally said I was broke, to which he replied, "You are stupid, I am never going to pay you back or help you out." I dropped him as friend and have had very little contact with him since. He did hire my wife at a company he manages. I guess I should have saw this coming. I had just gotten married and had 2 kids. Another time he said, "Your kids aren't starving." He always just thought of himself. Could not care about anybody else. I guess I thought he was funny. Listened to his hooker stories and finally enough was enough. Last time I talked to him as a friend, he was asking me to get him some marijuana. I said it was way out of my way. I was too busy. He said too much to ask for it. I said, well, what would you do for me? When you grow up with a guy, it just seems it is too hard to recognize he isn't really a friend. Kept this inside for a while. Don't have any friends from high school anymore because they were all like this. Should have hung out with a better class, really. Throw away extremely long story short, I had a record deal with a very major record label. One of my best friends was my manager. I ignored one phone call from him when I was taking a day off and wanted to be out of contact, which he knew, and he decided that was the signal to call the label as the project was coming to a close and lie to them about how he had produced most of the record he hadn't, and proceeded to help leak some of the instrumentals to another producer at the label, who stole them and released them with other artists. Months of working night and day on a project fully by myself, from instrumental to vocals to mixing, went down the drain, and the final product ended up in so much legal red tape that I couldn't even release my own 100% self-created album for free, much less independently or on another label. My career rebounded, albeit mainly on the local, internet, and underground circuits. Whether that label could have taken me to be in the spotlight or not, I will never know. I haven't spoken to that friend in years. Every so often, he runs into my mother and he tries to stage these accidental meetings with me. I couldn't be more cold each time we interact, and he still tries to act as if he doesn't know why. He thinks one day everything will just go back to normal if he waits long enough. No, you live in a huge house and made a ton of money off exploiting my work. I am doing okay from busting my ass off. We will not be back to normal until you can promise me that album with that label backing it at that specific time in history wouldn't have made me a shit ton of money, because just parts of it sold to shittier artists obviously made you some. Please like, comment, and subscribe.